friend from Rhode Island, and I know that the presiding officer may have to go, so I'll just jump in the chair for you. How's that?
Madam President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me first thank my colleague from Minnesota for his courtesy in allowing this time for me when I would otherwise be presiding. I wanted to respond to the remarks that preceded Senator Franken's remarks by Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma, suggesting that the military's investment in green technologies was an unwelcome imposition on them against their wishes by outside political forces and on the basis of outside political considerations. I actually just held a hearing in the Environment and Public Works Committee on the subject of our Defense Department's investment and interest in alternative technologies. We had witnesses from all of the services, and the testimony was pretty clear and diametrically opposed to the point of view just expressed by the senator from Oklahoma. I can certainly appreciate the enthusiasm of my friend from Oklahoma for fossil fuels, since fossil fuels are a big home state industry in Oklahoma. But the testimony at the hearing was that the military was pursuing alternate fuels for reasons of its own, for reasons that related to protecting the troops, to being more efficient, and to protecting the strategic posture of the United States around the world. Perhaps the most striking testimony that they gave was that over 3,000 American soldiers gave their lives between 2003 and 2007 protecting our fuel convoys in Iraq. When you get in theater and you have a heavily fossil fuel-based military presence, the price you pay for that is paid in the blood of soldiers who die protecting the fuel convoys. 3,000 young men and women between 2003 and 2007. So to the extent that you can do things like a company in Rhode Island, the Cooley Company, does, and invest in tents that have their own solar capture built right into the fabric so that the cooling within the tent in the blazing heat of the Middle East can be done without having to truck that fuel in, without having to cost those soldiers their lives. That's not something that's being imposed on the military. That's something that they very much want to accomplish as part of their core mission. In Newport, Rhode Island, the Naval War College has a facility. They are building wind turbines there. They're building wind turbines there because they have calculated that over time they will save money by putting up those wind turbines compared to buying electricity. It's not an imposition from outside. It's not some green agenda coming from Washington or any place else. It's the Newport Naval Station saying, oh, we save money for our budget by doing this. And when we save that money, we can put it into these other uses like fighter aircraft and tanks and bullets and bandages and boots. The third piece of testimony had to do with the strategic posture of the country internationally, which is something that the military is concerned with in a very deep and profound way. And they made a couple of points. The first was that the less dependent that the United States is on the international oil market, the fewer vital interests we have to risk shedding our blood and spending our treasure to protect. And so it's in our national strategic interest to get off of our fossil fuel dependency and into a broader portfolio of energy sources. And the second is that the dangers of climate change, which are emerging which we are immersed in all around us if we look at the obvious evidence in front of our faces, create profound risks for social and civil unrest and violence in other parts of the world as things change, as estuaries flood and are no longer productive agriculturally, as relatively dry areas turn to desert and can no longer sustain life, as the great glaciers in the high mountains dissipate and change the flow patterns of rivers on which economic life of foreign individuals depends. All of those things create conflict and strife. And the American military is aware that where there is conflict and strife abroad, very often they are called in. And they feel a responsibility to try to avoid that. I take time every week to speak a little bit about climate change for a number of reasons. As I said, there are a lot of folks in Washington who would like to ignore this issue, and it is presently being ignored, which is unfortunate and, in fact, shameful. The messages about climate change that we are getting are coming through loud and clear, and we really ignore them at our peril. Every week for the past 15 months, as the presiding officer knows, I've distributed in our caucus, our weekly caucus, an update on some of the latest climate science bulletins, the news that is fresh that week. This week, the stories are that the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, in the weather statistics for the month of April 2012, reported warmer than average temperatures engulfing much of the contiguous United States during April, with the nationally averaged temperature at 55.7 degrees Fahrenheit, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above average, and the third warmest on record. Warmer than average temperatures were present for a large portion of the nation during April. 6 states in the central U.S. and 3 states in the Northeast had April temperatures ranking among their 10 warmest in history. Above average temperatures were also present for the Southeast, Upper Midwest, and much of the West. No state in the contiguous United States had April temperatures that were below average. None. April 2012 came on the heels of the warmest March on record for the lower 48. January to April 2012 was the warmest such period on record for the contiguous United States, with an average temperature of 45.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 5.4 degrees above the long-term average. 26 states, all east of the Rockies, were record warm for the 4-month period, and an additional 17 states had temperatures for the period among their 10 warmest. These rising temperatures can lead to a number of concerns. Snowpack and thus drinking water could be drastically reduced in California and surrounding western states. The Scripps Institute of Oceanography presented a study to California's Energy Commission last month explaining that warming of 1.5 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit between now and mid-century will reduce today's snowpack by 1/3. By 2100, at those temperatures, snowpack would be reduced by 2/3. That makes a big difference to the agricultural communities that depend on that water downstream of those snowpacks. Meanwhile, Science Daily reported that ozone and greenhouse gas pollution, such as black carbon, are expanding the tropics at a rate of 0.7 degrees per decade. Said the lead scientist, climatologist Robert J. Allen, the assistant professor at the University of California, Riverside, if the tropics are moving poleward, then the subtropics will become even drier, impacting regional agriculture, economy, and society. People are noticing the changes around them. Outside of the halls of Congress, where we have blinders on to this obvious issue, regular people see the changes, and they are concerned about them. The United States Geological Survey recently polled more than 10,000 visitors to the nation's wildlife refuges, hunters, fishermen, and families alike. 71% of those polled said they were, quote, personally concerned about climate change's effects on fish, wildlife, and habitats. 74% said that working to limit climate change's effects on fish, wildlife, and habitats would benefit future generations. But these special interests who deny that carbon pollution causes global temperatures to increase and who have such a profound and malign effect in this chamber deny that melting ice caps will raise our seas to dangerous levels, deny that all of these visible changes are taking place. The myth that these special interests propagate in the face of so much evidence is that the jury is still out on climate changes caused by carbon pollution, so we don't have to worry about it or even take precautions. This is false. It's just plain wrong. Virtually all of our most prestigious scientific and academic institutions have stated that climate change is happening and that human activities are the driving cause of this change. They say it in powerful language, particularly for scientists who are specific about what they say and guarded in the way they say it. The letter said, quote, "Observations throughout the world make it clear that climate change is occurring, and rigorous scientific research demonstrates that the greenhouse gases emitted by human activities are the primary driver. These conclusions are based on multiple, independent lines of evidence." And here's the final crescendo here. "Contrary assertions are inconsistent with an objective assessment of the vast body of peer-reviewed science." That's an awful nice way to say it, but in a nutshell, they're saying anybody who disagrees is making it up. And these are serious organizations: the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Chemical Society, Geophysical Union, Institute of Biological Sciences, Meteorological Society, Society of Agronomy, and on and on and on. And it's not just them. It's also the military services, as I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks. It's also the intelligence organizations of the country. It's also many, indeed most, of our electric utilities. It's many of our biggest capitalists and investors, and of course it's our insurance industry who has to pay for the damage that ensues. A recent article I'll quote from said, "The worldwide insurance industry is huge, 3 times bigger than the oil industry, and right now these companies are running scared. Some are threatening to cancel coverage for homeowners within 200 miles of the coast, where hurricanes are on the increase, and in drying areas of the West where wildfires have wreaked havoc." Marsh and McLennan, one of the largest insurance brokers, called climate change, quote, "one of the most significant emerging risks facing the world today." While insurance giant AIG has established an Office of Environment and Climate Change to assess the risks to insurers in the years ahead. The industry's own scientists are predicting that things could get a lot worse in the years ahead. I'm indebted to the presiding officer, the junior senator from Minnesota, for the following observation, which is that 97% of the climate scientists who are most actively publishing accept that the verdict is in on carbon pollution causing climate and oceanic changes. And the example that he and I have discussed, and I can't help but, since he's presiding right now, to refer to it again, we are being asked in this body to ignore facts that 97% of scientists tell us are real. Now, translate that into our personal lives. What if a child of ours was sick and we went to a doctor and said, "Is there something I need to do about it? Is there treatment that is necessary? What's the deal here?" And you got an opinion, and then you said, "You know, I'm going to be a cautious, prudent parent because the treatment might be expensive. I want to make sure I'm going down the right path, so I'm going to get a second opinion." And you got your second opinion. And then you got a third opinion. You are a really prudent parent, and you got a third opinion. Let's say you kept going. You got a fourth opinion, a fifth, a 15th, a 25th, a 45th, a 75th, a 95th. You got 100 opinions. People would think that was a little odd, but never mind. And then let's say that 97% of those professional opinions came back saying, yes, your child is ill and needs this treatment. Would you then responsibly say, you know what, the jury is still out on the question of why my child is sick. Let's not take any action now. These 97% of the doctors might be alarmists. We don't really want to go there, and after all, it'll cost money to buy the medicine. Would any responsible parent do that? No. It's a ludicrous proposition. And that's just how ludicrous the proposition is that climate change is not real. And the underlying facts are ancient ones. I mean, the guy who discovered that climate change is caused by the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, John Tyndall, discovered this in 1863, at the time of the Civil War, 150 years ago. This is not a novelty. This is old, established science. And it has become clear since that there is a change that is happening. We pump out 7 to 8 gigatons a year. A gigaton is a billion, not a million, a billion metric tons. We pump out 7 to 8 billion metric tons a year of carbon dioxide. And guess what? That adds to the carbon load in the atmosphere. And this is something that isn't a theory. This is something that is a measurement now. For 8,000 centuries, mankind has existed in an atmospheric bandwidth of 170 to 300 parts per million of carbon dioxide. 170 to 300, 8,000 centuries, 800,000 years. We've been an agricultural species for about 10,000 years, to give you an idea. 800,000 years, we're picking things off of bushes. Our entire history as a species falls essentially in that 800,000 years. All of our development as a species has happened in the last probably 20,000 years. So it's been a long run in that safe bandwidth of 170 to 300 parts per million. We've shot out of it. We're at 390 parts per million and climbing. And the record in history as to what happens on this planet when we spike out of that range is an ominous one. It is a bad trajectory. It takes you back to massive ocean die-offs that are in the geologic record. So this is something that we need to be very careful about, and we need to take action. And the suggestion that it's not happening is false. The suggestion that we can wait it out is both imprudent, reckless, and ill-advised. And the notion that our professional career military, who've lost 3,000 men and women defending fuel convoys in Iraq, are engaged in trying to get off fossil fuels because of some outside political agenda that they don't share is a preposterous allegation to make about the men and women who run our military, who make these decisions for our military, and who are seeking to defend the soldiers out in the field against these consequences. With that, I will yield the floor, once again thanking the distinguished senator from Minnesota for allowing me this time when I would have otherwise been sitting there and presiding. So with appreciation to Senator Franken, I yield the floor and I suggest the absence of a quorum. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The distinguished senator from Georgia.
I'd like to ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated
Without objection.
and apologize for keeping the President and the rest of the staff here a little later than they might want to, but I had an important message that will be brief. Mr. President, I introduced legislation not too long ago called the Restoration of Fairness Act, and it particularly was number Senate Resolution 1843. It was a reaction to the NLRB's decision in the specialty health care case where a group of nurses within specialty health care asked for permission to unionize and organize within that unit. NLRB granted that, and that became the first micro-union that's ever really existed in the United States of America. Today, it's my understanding that NLRB has approved the following. The second floor shoe department at Bergdorf Goodman in New York and the fifth floor contemporary shoe department in Bergdorf Goodman, which the two combined have 45 employees out of 370. They've granted them the right to organize. Mr. President, this is a gigantic leap in that differs from 75 years of settled labor law. Micro-unions with any retail establishment, medical establishment, or any other type of business prevents cross-training, causes discord, and is a way to upset an organization that otherwise is not upset. Labor law in this country has been settled for a long time. Last year, 70% of all the union calls in the United States of America passed on their vote. There is not a problem with unions being able to organize, but there's a huge problem if we continue to tear down the firewalls that had the playing field level. Just recently, the courts have twice thrown out rulings of the National Labor Relations Board. One on ambush elections, where they tried to reduce the average period of time from 58 days to 10, which is totally unrealistic. And even more importantly, on the posting rule, where the employers were asked to post pro-organization posters within their break room in their companies. Both times the courts threw them out and said NLRB has reached too far. It is my hope the same thing would happen here again, but in the meantime, I want to encourage the Senate to allow us to bring Senate 1843 to the floor and make this debate. In the free enterprise system, in the tedious and economy we have today in this country, the last thing we need is to begin changing labor law and pitting organized labor against management in an adversarial type of way. This example at Bergdorf Goodman today is an example of the National Labor Relations Board doing in a regulation what we ought to be doing in legislation on the floor of the Senate. My biggest concern is that now it seems like the administration's leadership in every department has determined if we can circumvent the legislative body and through regulation do what we can't do on the floor, we'll forget about the House, we'll forget about the Senate, and it'll be the executive and the judicial branch that run the United States of America. That's not good for our country, and that's wrong. So I'm going to call on the Senate and ask our leadership to let us bring this resolution to the floor, to let us debate it and see if we really want to change 75 settled years of labor law and unbalance the playing field between management and labor. I don't think that we do. Now, I'm sorry to rush to the floor when I just heard this information, but I think it's so important that we nip it in the bud, that we let the playing field remain balanced, and we not turn over the operation of settled labor law to an NLRB that, quite frankly, seems to have run amok as far as I'm concerned. Mr. President, I appreciate the opportunity, and I yield back the balance of my time and would note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The Majority Leader.
Ask consent the call according be vitiated.
Without
I
objection.
now ask permission, unanimous consent, that the Senate proceed to approve the morning business. Senators allowed to speak for 10 minutes each.
Also without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the following postal naming bills, calendar number 401, 402, and 403.
Clerk will report.
Calendar number 401, H.R. 2415, an act to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 11 Dock Street in Pittston, Pennsylvania as a Trooper Joshua D. Miller Post Office building. Calendar number 402, H.R. 3220, an act to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 170 Evergreen Square Southwest in Pine City, Minnesota as the Master Sergeant Daniel L. Fetter Post Office. Calendar 403, H.R. 3413, an act to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 1449 West Avenue in Bronx, New York, as a private Isaac T. Cortez Post Office.
Without objection, the Senate proceeds to the measures en bloc.
I ask consent that we now proceed to H.R. 4045. I'm so sorry. I want to make sure that those namings are passed.
Yes.
Mr. President, I'm sorry. I ask unanimous consent. The bills be read a third time passed and blocked. The motion to reconsider be laid on the table and blocked with no intervening action or debate. Any related statements be printed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask that we proceed to H.R. 4045.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 4045, an act to modify the Department of Defense program guidance, and so forth.
Without objection, the Senate proceeds to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the bill be read a third time passed and motion to consider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to this matter be placed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask we proceed to H.R. 4119.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 4119, an act to reduce the trafficking of drugs and to prevent human smuggling across the southwest border by deterring the construction and use of border tunnels.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I now ask unanimous consent the bill be read a third time. It be passed. The motion reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to this matter be placed in the record as if given.
Without objection.
I now ask consent that we go to calendar number 394.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 394, H.R. 4849, an act to direct the Secretary of the Interior to issue commercial use authorizations to commercial stock operators and so forth and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate proceeds to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent that a Boxer Feinstein substitute amendment which is the desk be agreed to. The bill as amended be read a third time passed and motion to reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to the bill be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent as if in executive session that the injunction of secrecy be removed from the following treaties transmitted to the Senate on April 17th, May 17, 2012 by the President of the United States. Protocol amending the Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, Treaty number 112-5, Convention on the law applicable to certain rights in respect of securities held with an intermediary, Treaty document number 112-6, Convention on the rights of persons with disabilities, Treaty number 112-7, Convention with Chile, Treaty document number 112-8-8. I further ask that the treaties be considered as having been read the first time, that they be referred with accompanying papers to the Committee on Foreign Relations, ordered to be printed and sent to President Obama, and that the President's messages be printed in the record.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes the business day, the Senate adjourn until 2 p.m. on Monday, May 21st, the following the prayer and the pledge. Journal proceedings be approved to date. The morning hour be deemed expired. Time for the two leaders be reserved for use later in the day. And at that time, the Majority Leader be recognized. Further, that at 4:30 p.m., the Senate proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 552, Paul Watford of California, to be the United States Circuit Judge for the Ninth Circuit, with 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled in the usual forum. And upon the use or reading back of that time, the Senate proceed to vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the nomination. And that if cloture is not invoked, Senate resume legislative session, proceed to vote on the motion to vote cloture on the motion to proceed to S 3187, the FDA user fee legislation.
Without objection.
Mr. President, it's my intention to resume the motion to proceed to counter number 400, the FDA user fee legislation, when we convene on Monday at 5:30 on Monday. There will be at least one roll call vote on the motion to vote cloture on the Watford nomination. So, Mr. President, if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that we adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 2 p.m. Monday, May 21st.
And that